Over the course of the last 24 to 48 hours, things are becoming a lot more clear. We're getting a better idea on the overall health of Xbox as a platform and Game Pass and how sustainable, how profitable it is. Xbox leadership in the months and years have kind of just consistently said things are looking good, we're growing, but they've also indicated multiple times that things actually aren't all that well. And Xbox isn't hitting the numbers that they need to. Just because you're profitable doesn't mean that you're appeasing the overlords over at Microsoft, and now we have new reporting which indicates that Activision Blizzard merger that happened in 2022, again, just more evidence that has totally ruined this company. We've had layoffs, we've had multiple studios shut down, tons of cancellations, and they've all been associated to that $60 billion merger. And it seems like this situation, everything that's happening with Game Pass, is once again being linked to that merger. So look, Xbox isn't even being consistent with the changes that are happening with Game Pass. We were told initially, look, we're giving you guys massive upgrades. Aren't you happy with your Fortnite subscription and your Ubisoft Plus Classics? That explains why we're upping it by $10. But Jeff Keighley actually responded on Twitter saying, I actually just received an email on the new Xbox Game Pass pricing due to changing market conditions. This is being sent out to everybody, but this is their new explanation. They're trying to blame it on tariffs, inflation, all of that, changing market conditions. That's the nonsense they're now trying to spill out. People aren't believing it because it's total nonsense. And ultimately, this all just links back to Xbox and its overall health or lack of health, and how this company really has just done some disastrous things over the years, like putting themselves in a terrible position by spending $60 to $70 billion on a company that they just were not ready for. Now, it's important to understand that with this little diagram right here that they showed on their initial announcement post of the changes, I mentioned this in the last video, but you see on the premium new Xbox published games within a year of launch. You see that little star right there. And if you go down into the terms right here, excludes Call of Duty titles. Why do they have that there? Why do they have that there? Why did they just recently remove Game Pass discount on all Call of Duty add-ons, the 10% or so? I wonder why. And yeah, it is because of this merger, the $60 billion that they spent on, and we know this because of a new report coming from Bloomberg. This is investigative reporting coming from Cecilia D'Anastasio, and she has some breaking details from inside of Xbox from staff that have leaked that it's not because of market conditions, but it's actually because they are not making enough money off of Call of fucking Duty. Yes, you heard me right. The price hike and other changes to the Game Pass plans are a sign that Xbox's big streaming push is still not generating the revenue it would like 8 years after launch, according to interviews with 7 current and former Xbox employees. Surprise, surprise, no. The company is putting some of its top titles in the streaming service, but that's cutting into sales of higher margin games like Call of Duty, which came with Microsoft's 2023 acquisition of Activision Blizzard Inc., said the people who asked not to be identified. Xbox gave up more than $300 million in sales of Call of Duty on console and PCs last year, according to one of the former employees who asked not to be identified, discussing internal estimates. You got to understand, when you pivot away from a large portion of the gaming audience not spending $70 on their yearly Call of Duty installment and instead subscribing to a service maybe just for a month or two, that spells danger, and it looks like it truly is harming Xbox as a platform, and now we are seeing them go in overdrive trying to make money. This is pressure that is being put down from Microsoft. This was the assumption we all had for a while now. Microsoft is not going to be lenient with Xbox. Their bigger focus right now is on AI. They need all of the money, all of the investment in that. So when you have Xbox struggling because they made a terrible business decision with that merger that was supposed to show amazing, phenomenal growth with Game Pass that has not happened, well, the pressure is on. Now, the report continues saying Game Pass has not delivered the explosive growth Microsoft anticipated post-Activision, and they've realized their infrastructure costs don't align with their pricing model, said Joost van Drunen, founder of the video game and analytics firm Aldora. And Xbox launched its streaming service at a relatively low price, like all of the streaming services. It cost initially $10 a month for over 100 games when it debuted in 2017. Those were all older titles. A year later, Xbox announced it would offer subscribers its own own new games on the day of release for no extra fee. This was a big deal because this actually gave Xbox a competitive advantage when they desperately needed it. They didn't have the studios, they weren't pushing out consistent great games. They had maybe one or so every single year. But what followed after this was their investment. They went after so many studios. It started off small at first. They went after Obsidian, In Exile Entertainment, a number of other smaller studios. Then it came Bethesda, ZeniMax. That was a bigger purchase. Then the massive one was Activision Blizzard at $70 billion. And a lot of people were concerned, are they going to be able to bring in the growth, the revenue that they need for Game Pass to make that purchase look good, to the eyes of Microsoft leadership? And the answer right now is obviously no. And we've seen the impact of that throughout the year. It isn't just what's happening right now to consumers, but it's also developers themselves. Thousands of developers are losing their jobs. Studios are being shut down. Games are being canceled because of this purchase. And now Microsoft obviously being dissatisfied with the money that's coming in, and it's just not good enough. Current and former employees said that move of day one releases for Game Pass was controversial internally, but they needed a competitive advantage. I understand why they did it, but developing new video games can take years and cost hundreds of millions of dollars, and the model had long been to sell them for $60 to $70 each, making more still on upgrades and in-game purchases. The Game Pass streaming model upended that by putting so many titles in all you can eat subscription. And again, when you're only selling this for, back in 2023, it was $15 a month. Most people subscribe for maybe a month or two or three, and that's that. And you're not getting that massive sale of $70 or so that you can truly, get all of the income that you usually would from a premium experience that's been worked on for years. So it continues saying, over the past decade, Microsoft invested billions acquiring some of the most successful video game studios. The $70 billion deal to purchase Activision Blizzard was the largest video game acquisition in history. But as Bloomberg here reports, putting Call of Duty on Game Pass was a great deal for subscribers, but not great for Xbox's sale of the game, according to former employees with knowledge of the business. While the latest iteration of the shooting title, Call of Duty Black Ops 6, was the top-selling video game in the US last year, again, massive franchise, it's going to make numbers, but there is a difference between selling 35 million and 30 million. And the biggest ever for the franchise, that was largely due to Sony's PlayStation, which accounted for 82% of sales. That is honestly insane. The trade publication IGN reported. That is insane. It just shows that the Xbox platform is almost irrelevant right now, and that gives you a better understanding why they're launching all of their games on the PlayStation 5, because the Xbox console has truly just died out. And that's why Xbox is trying to move beyond the barriers of the console. That's why they want PC. That's why they want cloud. And they also want to get on platforms like PlayStation and Nintendo and make their own mark. Now, subscription revenue was up 16% industry-wide, according to IGN, due in part to customers playing the new Call of Duty on Game Pass. So it is driving in some money, some customers, but it obviously is not enough when you're bleeding $300 million. Some may have paid for a month or two and canceled, like I assume a lot of people may have done, unlike the industry's old model where they would have paid $70 and own the game. Although I would think that a lot of people, especially if, Xbox was actually delivering with their experiences and their studios weren't on fire the last couple of years, most people would be okay staying subscribed year round. But Xbox has truly not given, I think, really gamers a reason to stay subscribed consistently, and that is due to weak leadership coming from Xbox. When I say that, I mean Phil Spencer, Matt Booty, Sarah Bond, and those individuals. They have let down in that area, and I personally think it is unacceptable. There's been no repercussions for these individuals. If anything, they've just continued to go higher and higher in the corporate ladder. I just don't get it. This report continues to mention some other executives that were formerly associated with Xbox Game Studios, such as Vice President Shannon Loftus, who wrote on LinkedIn that while Game Pass can claim a few victories with games that otherwise would have sunk beneath waves, human fall flat, the majority of game adoption on Game Pass comes at the expense of retail revenue. Loftus declined to comment, and this is something that industry-wide we've been hearing from a lot of gaming veterans, many of them, such as former Sony head Sean Layden, former Bethesda Vice President Pete Hines, and various other industry icons, executives, developers have all come forward questioning the sustainability and also talking about the dangers of a subscription service taking off like this, as it removes the value from people actually buying games. And very much so, we are now seeing the impact, especially with that push at $30. Now, it is mentioned here, again, this is the pressure that is coming coming down from above to Xbox leadership. Microsoft Chief Financial Officer Amy Hood has asked Xbox to find other ways to increase profit according to the current and former employees. This is all the stuff. These are the secret reasons. This is something that Xbox will never admit, or any of their leadership, but this is why all of the chaos that we've seen the last year or two, it's all because of that merger, the damage that it has done to the health of this platform, and it's something that a lot of us saw. It was an obvious outcome, unfortunately. And lastly, from this Bloomberg piece, it is mentioned after a surge during the pandemic, like all of the gaming business, Game Pass's rate of growth has slowed significantly, from 80% between 2020 and 2021 to 36% between 2022 and 2024, according to numbers Xbox released. Subscribers were 34 million in February of 2024, the last time the company shared the data. Xbox has said Game Pass is profitable. Again, even if it is profitable, doesn't mean that Microsoft is satisfied, and they clearly aren't, with revenue reaching a record of nearly $5 billion for the fiscal year that ended in June. And even still with that number, I question, especially with all the costs that are associated with running the many studios and everything else with the service. So truly, the Activision Blizzard merger has tanked Xbox at the worst time, because the corporate overheads over at Microsoft, their interest in gaming is not as much as it once was. And I say that because their interest is focused on AI. And when they see the costs that are being associated with the gaming business, they're dissatisfied. They were promised a lot more growth, and they're not getting that. And even recently, we actually heard from the ex-FTC chairman. She was one of the individuals that tried to stop the deal from happening with Activision Blizzard, questioning that, Microsoft could ruin the gaming industry. And now, my God, but she said she slammed Microsoft as too big to care after Game Pass price jumps 50%. This is something that Microsoft said during that whole 2022 FTC trial. Game Pass prices will not increase as a result of the merger, and certainly will not increase to a point that offsets the substantial benefits of Activision titles coming to Game Pass on a day-and-date basis, the company claimed back in 2023. We can now say for sure,
the lie detector test determined that was a lie.
Furthermore, it must be noted that the changes that are coming to Game Pass is set for November 4th. I find that date rather interesting, just because a certain video game installment of Call of Duty Black Ops 7 launches November 14th. And if you subscribe then, and you subscribe maybe through December, you're going to be probably spending a little over $60. And I really do think that this has all been deliberate to, again, try to maximize at least getting that $60 out of consumers with the Call of Duty franchise. That is their big staple franchise, and that is what Xbox is heavily relying on moving forward. And it comes at the absolute worst time. But it must be mentioned, though, Lena Khan, this former FTC chair, she took to X and she totally roasted Microsoft, saying the acquisition of Activision has been followed by significant price hikes and layoffs, harming both gamers and developers. As we've seen across sectors, increasing market consolidation and increasing prices often go hand in hand. As dominant firms become too big to care, they can make things worse for their customers without having to worry about the consequences. And furthermore, like I said, this comes at a time in which they are heavily relying on Call of Duty being a hit. And everything has indicated Call of Duty Black Ops 7 isn't going to do as good as it really any of these newer installments. It might just be one of the lowest selling Call of Duty titles in the last decade. I say that because the beta has just absolutely no interest. Call of Duty Black Ops 7 Early Access beta records disappointing figures on Steam and Twitch. Just to put it into perspective, it peaked at 74,000 players. In comparison, Battlefield 6 peaked at over 400,000. That just shows you that right now it definitely feels like Black Ops is going to be hurting this fall, and seemingly Xbox as well. And furthermore, I just find this astonishing, but we even have Black Ops 7 developers of Treyarch admitting that they're worried about series fatigue after back-to-back games. And that fatigue is very real, as we saw with Modern Warfare 3 after Modern Warfare 2. This franchise is being milked dry. Originally, it was by Bobby Kotick a couple of years ago and the other Activision executives, and Xbox took over. They made some lofty promises like, hey, maybe Call of Duty developers can work on other franchises, and maybe Blizzard can try some new things. And unfortunately, they've just reverted back to their old ways, in which every single studio, it's just Call of Duty, Call of Duty, Call of Duty. Yearly installments have to happen. And it's just so unfortunate, but it just feels like things are only going to get worse because the pressure is on. Microsoft is eagerly looking at their investment investment that they made into Activision Blizzard and wondering why the growth that was supposed to be associated with that purchase has not happened. And seemingly Phil Spencer, Sarah Bond, Matt Booty, the rest of that Xbox leadership team, they have backed themselves into a corner with what can be argued as a truly disastrous decision of buying Activision Blizzard that has harmed the Xbox platform. And honestly, right now it is a question if Xbox will exist in the coming years. But right now things look bleak, and this new report coming from Bloomberg definitely exposes what's really happening behind the scenes over at Xbox. Anyway, what do you make of all of it? Let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below. But thank you for watching. Make sure to leave a like if you did enjoy this video, or if you found any informative value. Consider subscribing for more videos like this, and I'll see you later.